right, but this guy is very, very popular. In fact, he's very, 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 very pro, I don't want to say pro-terrorist, but he's very, very pro-Islam and anti-Israel and gets on the end. But I'm just going on there. I believe in a thing, what's your enemy up to? I like to go to somebody's website and say, what are they thinking? And, say steel sharpens steel. Read these people, and it's a good way to think kind of practice mentally if you ever run into one, how to combat them. But I've seen this on this particular website, very popular, where, he's very pro, well, the government was behind this, either the government saying, let it happen, or they were actually conniving. I mean, I've run across that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I believe I know who you're talking about. He's a frequent guest on the Russian and Iranian news, and there's your proof right there. That's not a patriot. That's a traitor.
Exactly.
But, okay, what I wanted to ask you is, now, so was he very anti-war? Obviously he was when we were in the Vietnam era there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he made an interesting, of course, I never was a hippie. I wasn't preppy either, but I don't want to say anything. For a 22-year-old, my brother and I, we were very astute as far as politics was concerned, even though we were young, and that's because we had parents, and in fact, Saturday morning, my parents were they weren't activists, but they read a lot. They were kept up on the thing on politics and what was going on.
Right.
And I can remember as a very young girl and just barely out of my teens, sitting at the breakfast table and hearing about my parents discuss the fact when Fidel finally came out and admitted he was a communist. At first he was not a communist.
Right.
When he finally came out and admitted, I'm a communist, I'm in line with Russia, I can remember them commenting that. Well, that may have influenced us, but within my own heart, I was, was kind of inducted into politics and what was going on. But as far as my conservative views, and even in my early 20s, always been very, very pro-American, very patriotic, and if you want to call, for lack of a better term, very conservative. But one thing that Joseph made a remark to me one time, and I wanted to bring this up, and I've always thought, I've pondered this over and over many times what he meant by this, and you kind of jog my memory when you mentioned being anti-war. He told me one time when he was trying, just really pressing hard to get me to go ahead and sign off to sign off and join his Marxist views. And of course, I can't remember exactly my arguments against it. He made an interesting remark, and he said this. He says, well, did you ever happen to think, Lee, that when we take over, you may be one of the leaders? And he's talking about youth.
Wow.
And I kind of looked at him and was kind of taken aback by that, but I've often wondered, what did he mean by leader? Obviously he was talking about youth, American youth.
Right, that he made that comment in the 60s?
Yeah, no, he made it in the early 70s.
Early 70s, okay.
We were still in Vietnam at the time.
Okay.
So apparently, I don't know if he was officially sent out to recruit college youth, but certainly, he tried his best with me. But he made that kind of remark, and he was very, very adamant that they were going to win. Yeah,
well, because he knew that they were infiltrating us at an alarming rate through the indoctrination of young people like you were there, and the colleges, they were targeting them. The media was already, infiltrated,
right.
And so now, did he ever mention that the KGB was involved in infiltration of the Democrat Party, or the, anything else?
No, he never mentioned the KGB. I never heard him mention that.
Mm-hmm. Did he ever mention he had any Russian contacts or at all? Anyone from Russia?
No, he didn't mention that he had any contacts, Russian contacts, but he did mention he had Cuban contacts.
Cuban?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because a lot of times Cuban intelligence would the Russians are very clever. They use a middleman always, so they're deflected from any blame.
Right.
And that's why they use Cuban intelligence there. I had a feeling. Okay.
Now he admitted to me one time, now, like I say, I don't have no way of proving it. I wasn't there. But according to him, he claimed that he actually met with Cuban intelligence officers in Florida.
Uh-huh.
Now, he did mention that. Like I said, this is what he told me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so they were relaying messages from the KGB. That's really how it works.
Right. And I know that he told me later on, and shortly before I got out of college, and he'd come up from Florida and was talking to me, and he told me that he was elder this time and had an insurance business, and he told me that just a few days before he come up, that according to him now he'd been paid a visit by some FBI agents.
Wow.
And now he said anything that, of course, I can't remember what he said, but he more or less said that he told them off, and he contacted his attorney while they were in the office, and of course they were cowed and left. But the point is, I think that even after he was blacklisted to run out of Savannah, Georgia, and relocated in Florida as late as the 70s, the early 70s, for whatever reason, whatever they knew about him, the FBI, was actually trailing him or investigating him or showing up anything to question him.
Mm-hmm. So now you said to me that he received letters from prominent Democrats that you would really rather not mention, which I understand.
Right.
So now, and these letters were showing him support for his blacklisting?
In fact, the thing, I don't have those letters, and in fact, it would look kind of funny and saying if I said, well, let me copy them, and I'd love to have them. But I do have another relative who was there. It was she and I and Joseph, and she saw him hand me the letters. She was there as I read them. She was there as I commented, and he commented. But yeah, he let me read 3 letters he'd received from 3 very prominent Democrat officials.
Right.
And all 3 of them had been candidates for office, for public office at one time or another. I read all 3, and to say that I was shocked, I really wasn't shocked, but I can remember my reaction. I could feel it. I was scared. I was really, really frightened that these men were in public office, that they were on the national scene, and I don't want to, steal any Glenn Beck's thunder, but I guess at that time, I can't remember exactly, they would have come off as what Glenn Beck calls progressives, it was a social rights, social equality, the mantra that these insidious people in the Democratic Party use.
Yeah.
And they were in perfect sympathy with him and corresponding with him, and I can't remember verbatim the letters, but I do remember that they were in sympathy with him and his political viewpoints. But there was one of those letters by one individual that was particularly in Joseph's camp and thing. And one thing that I could do remember what this politician wrote him from that letter. And the gist of it was, after we're in power, that he would do to implement these going from the Marxist socialists, in other words, where Joseph was coming from, this particular politician was really behind that he really wanted to implement these. And perhaps he was an Obama before there was an Obama, I don't know, but I was really struck by that. That stands out in my mind.
Well, the Cuban intelligence link is the Russian KGB link, and really what we're seeing is the Sovietization of America. That's another problem of many. I have a few problems with Glenn Beck that I trust him. He's very good with certain things, but certain things I know, I'm doing this a long time, I know, and what I'm talking about, and this is the Sovietization of the Democrat Party that happened long ago, and that's another reason why I'm putting this all together right now. And
well, Steve, I want to tell you, that's why over the years, particularly since Joseph, and our party company, he went his way to pursue the conspiracy theories behind, JFK assassination, and I went on to other things. But since then, when I see some talking heads, some pundit, even those that they have contributors to Fox News, and who try to minimize or deny that the Democratic Party has been infiltrated by these Marxists, by these socialists, and I'm talking about prior to Obama coming to office and saying, I'm sitting here and it's like that. I would laugh. I think, you're idiots. that me knowing what I know, knowing what comes confessed out of the mouth of my cousin, course, been following the dots, for the past 40 years, and these people deny that. And to me, if you're an expert and you're talking to millions of people around the country, and you're saying a thing that the Democratic Party has not been compromised, that there has not been communist infiltration, you either don't know what you're talking about, but you need to shut up.
Right, and this is my point. Is you know what it is too? They're afraid to speak the truth.
Right, that's scary though, because Steve, these are the times and the thing. And I've really thought about this, and I'm not talking about doing anything, wild or extremist, but Americans need to get serious about this. I mean, we're really in trouble.
Yes, this is and again, that's the problem. One problem I have with Glenn Beck. I know he would never put on his blackboard what I put on my website, The Conservative Monster, and that is that this is not American progressivism. This is an international communist conspiracy that started long ago, and the tentacles reach back to Russia, and the roots of it were in Cuban intelligence. Now Russia's branching to Venezuela, Brazil, and they're doing military exercises in Nicaragua this month. So there are, now did he ever? So he died before the collapse of the Soviet Union, right? Obviously.
Right. He died in the early '80s, and under very mysterious circumstances. Of course, once the worst case scenario starts rolling in your mind, one thing leads to another. But he was murdered, and it was never solved. Now, it could have been, a mugging or house breaking like that, but it never was solved.
How old was he?
He was in his 80s.
Oh, 80s. Okay.
But like I say, it could have been a random crime. But it's like, the makings really of a good novel.
Yeah, it does, because there are many people that at his age, I don't know, because they would have, if they wanted to hurt him or kill him, they would have done it sooner.
Right.
Unless they were afraid at the last minute he was going to speak on something that they didn't want him to speak about. But I think I don't know if it was a communist link to it, because I think they would have killed him much sooner.
Probably would have, but one thing too about though he was a private individual, and he was obviously an activist and for this. So, but regardless of his private business and his being a private citizen, whatever he was into, and this was in the 50s when I was just a little tiny thing. And but whatever he did and however outspoken he was, it was bad enough for the authorities in Savannah to invite him to leave.
Right.
And he was actually blacklisted by McCarthy. Well, to me, he had to be, had to have some kind of influence for him to get on McCarthy's list.
Oh yeah, the FBI was watching him long before they visited his house.
Right.
Boy, this is very interesting, and I'm going to put this on theconservativemonster.com. Just stay on the line, and I want to speak to you 1 minute. But thank you so much for being on the Conservative Monster radio show. This was really an excellent.
Well, Steve, I wanted to say too. In fact, the thing I was thinking about this earlier, particularly since I've begun, was introduced to you and began to reading. And I want to tell you this, and people like you need to hear this sometime, because I know sometimes it can seem like you're a voice in the wilderness who's listening, but I want to tell you that I respect you and admire you for your courage, for your outspokenness. And one thing I can say is keep on, because God knows, I think, how many people are saying that you're going to wake up to really what peril our country is in if we don't stop this stuff.
Yeah, people need to be informed about the danger that they're in and their children are in, because communism has been cleansed, and people walk around, they think it's just like capitalism or it's enlightening like European socialism, but things can turn, and I have a feeling we have some very evil people with some very evil agenda, and it's a global evil communist agenda, and they're not looking for equality. They're not looking for social justice. They're looking for global slavery and absolute power.
I I totally agree, Steve.
So, but okay. So hold on one second, Lee.
Okay.